My political foundation was also well and truly laid at that time. Our gay team, by the way, gay in 1960 is not gay in 2025. Gay, outgoing, happy. Our gay team consisted of some of the most radical elements that could be found in the country at that time. We were regular and voracious readers of the Lagos Daily News, as well as conscientious believers in the opinions expressed in that paper. Back in 1922, and when I was peregrinating from one school to another, my young mind had been saturated with the belief that the late Herbert Macaulay was the champion and defender of native rights and liberty. This belief must have been engendered by almanacs and calendars, which carried Herbert Macaulay's photographs, together with eulogistic captions on the man's political exploits, and by adulatory remarks made to my hearing about him by knowledgeable elders. The Lagos Daily News, of which Herbert Macaulay was proprietor and editor at the time, was an inflammatory sheet. Ultra-radical, intensely nationalistic, virulently hey, let me take it slowly. But the shit smoker is not shit as in S-H-I-T, it's shit as in S-H-E-E-T. Okay? So it's like a long shit. So I don't mean that it's shit as in S-H-I-T. The Lagos Daily News, of which Herbert Macaulay was proprietor and editor at the time, was an inflammatory sheet. Ultra-radical, intensely nationalistic, virulently and implacably anti-white. Africans who were friendly with white men or who went to the length of dining and wining with them were denounced as imperialist agents. So everybody, to any black person who was friendly to white person, Herbert Macaulay called them imperialist agents and branded as having sold Nigeria for their personal gains and advancement. Sounds more like obedient movement. With all these and other views expressed in the paper, our team readily concurred. It was one of our aims and objects to demonstrate our contempt. But let me pause to say something. I said it jokingly, but let me just explain myself. When you're young, it's good to have that mindset. And whether you want that one, checking come. But as you grow older, you should also be able to understand the fact that once you start learning new things, that maybe that radical approach may not be the only way to get things done. But doesn't mean that it's totally useless. It's useful, but you have to do more than just insult everybody. With all these and other views expressed in the paper, our team readily concurred. It was one of our aims and objects to demonstrate our contempt for and equality with the white man whenever an opportunity offered itself. Such opportunity was, however, rare, and when it did occur, we seized it firmly by the forelock. It was forbidden in our circle to say sir to, or I'll take that again. It was forbidden in our circle to say sir to, or take off our hats in the presence of a white man, as was the general practice. We resolved that on no account would we fraternize and dine with white people, who were the symbol of our political enslavement. Now looking back upon it, our resolve was really uncalled for. First of all, because we were beneath the notice of the white men in Abeokuta in any case. And secondly, because we were too far below the level of the handful of Africans in Abeokuta who were eligible for invitation to meals or socials with them. I must, however, confess that ineffective though it was when it was made, the resolution had made a much deeper impression upon my mind than I realized at the time. It was not until 1953, a year after I had been in office as Minister of Local Government and Leader of Government Business in the Western region, that I sincerely felt free to fraternize and eat with white officials. It is on record that before 1952, all the invitations to social parties that were sent to me by the Chief Commissioner, Western Region, and the Governor of Nigeria were spurned by me out of hand. In spite of myself, I did not even show the courtesy of acknowledging them. The spell and impact which the personality and the views of Abat Macaulay cast and made on me must have been enchanting and profound. It was some 20 years later that I was able to wade out of the slough of prejudices with which I had been indoctrinated against certain Nigerian leaders, and to make my own independent appraisal of the part they had played in our national struggles. You see why I say it's similar to obedient movement? You criticize everybody, you insult everybody, you hate everybody, then later discover that it wasn't even necessary. So I was saying that just like Papa, sometimes, you get involved with politics and people just engineer your mind, sometimes condition your mind, with or without your approval. Essentially, you begin to say things and you think you're doing it because you have thought about it, but in all honesty, you've not even really thought about it. And so Abat Macaulay was larger than life in the 1920s. He was a publisher. He was also involved with NNDP. He founded the party. So naturally, he was very, very influential. So younger people, of course, looked up to him. And sometimes you make up whatever you are deciding is actually your mind being made up for you by somebody else who has influence over you. And so for Papa, he's saying that since the 1920s up until 1953, he thought a certain way about white people, but eventually he was able to make up his own mind. He says it was some 20 years later that I was able to wade out of the slough of prejudices with which I had been indoctrinated. Let's continue. Furthermore, during these 9 months, I read as widely as possible. This was imperative because our circle, apart from being gay and political, again, gay means happy, means outgoing, and political, also wanted to appear literary and well-informed. And the habit of reading good books, which I then cultivated, has not deserted me. My literary acquaintances then were fairly large and varied. Shakespeare, Dickens, R.L. Stevenson, Emerson, Lord Avebury, Sir Walter Scott, Avebury, Ernst Leet, Albert Hubbard, and several others. Shakespeare is my favorite. I have read all his plays, and I've reread some of them like Julius Caesar, Hamlet, The Tempest, Antony and Cleopatra, and Henry V, more than 3 times. Okay, we're going to move on again to another part. Above all, I threw myself wholeheartedly into the physical and games activities at Ogbe School. As a result, I was appointed the games master of the school and the captain of its football team, where there were many big boys and big girls, some as old as myself in the school. This was, of course, the common pattern in all schools at the time. In my capacity as physical instructor, I received the special commendation of one Colonel Laming, who visited Nigeria in 1928 or 1929 as the inspector in physical training for my enthusiasm and proficiency. The headmaster of the school, now Oba A.O. Okukwe, the Alakperu of Ikperu, highly valued my services. Though I could appear carefree and all that outside school, I was a stern disciplinarian among pupils, and the headmaster knew it. I took a keen interest in the pupils, particularly those in my class, but I did not permit any kind of undue familiarity between them and me. The headmaster trusted in my sense of discipline and responsibility, so that on 2 occasions he left me in charge of the entire school over the heads of certificated teachers when he was away for a few hours on some outside engagements. When I left the school, the headmaster gave me a testimonial recounting my services to the school in superlative terms. Towards the end of 1928, I concentrated my attention mainly on the pursuit of my ambition. I took correspondence courses in English, commercial knowledge, bookkeeping, business methods, and shorthand. I saved as hard as I could. During the June holidays in 1929, I went to Lagos and learned touch typing, which was not very common in those days. In order to continue my typing practice, I persuaded Mr. Mo to buy a typewriter. He bought a second-hand one, just like buying a computer. I took charge of it. I was now able to draft, unaided by him, all the letters, applications for work, and petitions which he handled in the course of his trade. and type them for him as well. By the end of 1929, I had become a fully fledged shorthand typist. Shorthand speed 100 to 120 words a minute, typing speed 40 words a minute. When I arrived in Lagos on 31st December 1929, in search of a job, I was full of high hopes for the future. Early in March 1930, I was appointed a shorthand typist by the German firm of J.W. Jackell and Company. So he says my salary was £6.10 per month. This was much less than what I had expected, but at the same time, much more than I ever received as a teacher, and about double what my classmates would receive in 1931 after they had completed their course. For a while, I felt that I was on the high road to realizing my hopes. But in August 1930, I lost my job with J.W. Jackell. My immediate boss, a Mr. Ruppel, tall and handsome, was a nice and jovial man. He and I got on very well together, almost as pals. The general manager, a Mr. Vogt, short and obese, was very stiff and aloof. And in any case, I had no dealings with him at all in the course of my duties. He spoke very little English. All his letters to the head office in Hamburg were written in German, and he dictated them to Mr. Ruppel, who was himself a first-rate shorthand typist. One morning on my arrival at the office, I noticed that Mr. Ruppel looked somewhat morose and uncommunicative. As I was about to settle down to work, he asked me to see the cashier. There I was paid off. Before I returned from the cashier to collect my coat and hat, my successor was already rattling away at the typewriter. He was one of the applicants who were rejected when I was appointed by Mr. Ruppel. His brother was, however, an important personality in Lagos. Nepotism, and he was obviously a friend of the general manager whom he visited from time to time. For 19 months thereafter, I was unemployed. For some months, I was able to live with economy fairly comfortably and on my accumulated resources, which consisted of my savings and a month's salary in lieu of notice. The trade depression of that period was having its adverse effects on Nigeria's economy, and both government and mercantile houses were retrenching staff. Nevertheless, I was hoping against hope that I might get another job, so I never tired of writing applications, but the result was the same: no vacancy. Okay, so I went from here. I plan not to rush sometimes, but let's take a little more before we go today. The choice was always open, and indeed offers were repeatedly made to me to return to teaching, but I was resolved not to enter any employment in which I would find myself in a position of inferiority to my former classmates at Wesley College. I was prepared to do any other legitimate work or staff instead. It was also open to me to take the senior clerical examination, and if I passed, and I had no doubt I would, seek appointment in a government department, but I had a strong aversion for the civil service because it was dominated by white officials and by African yes-men who would run when called by a white man, who would put their hands behind their backs in his presence, who would not dare to see anything wrong in anything the white man said or did, and who would punctuate every sentence they uttered before him with innumerable sirs. Whilst in the employ of Jackell, I had taken and passed the interpreter's examination, but I had refrained from following it up. With my attitude of mind, I felt sure that I was not the type to make any progress as a civil servant. When the monstrous reptile of starvation was creeping close, I struck on an idea, which I quickly put into operation. I organized evening classes for those preparing for preliminary Cambridge and junior preceptors examinations. What I made from this source was very meager, but with occasional help from friends to whom I had done some good turns, I eked out some sort of existence. The 19 months were among the most trying periods of my life. My most cherished hopes had been dashed. My span of life up to then, though short, had been some ups and downs, with more downs than ups. I had many moments of anxious reflections. During this period, I made the best possible use of my time. I polished up my mathematics, studied the study of Latin, and read as many books as I could afford to buy or borrow. In the course of my incursion into the wide realm of literature, I came across a big tome of a book, which was a collection of the essays and lectures of Robert G. Ingersoll. I started to read it, and I found that the more I read it, the more fascinated I became. It was said of him that Ingersoll was a smashing orator and a forceful personality. From his essays and lectures, which I read most avidly, I saw him as a matchless moralist and humanitarian, as well as a literary giant with a style which was at once lucid and in the best classical traditions. His language was so choice, his sentences so balanced and pithy, and his arguments so cogent, incisive, irresistible, and so replete with scientific and classical illustrations that I found myself racing breathlessly along with this amazing man as he delivered deft, precise, and shattering blows at all that is taught in the Holy Bible from Genesis to Revelation. By the time he was done with Ingersoll, he became an agnostic. Let me show one other thing. So the story of Adam and Eve, of Cain, and Noah and stuff. Let's just jump. At the end of my literary and mental excursion with Ingersoll, I had become a hearty admirer of agnosticism. I made further progress in this new field. I read other books, including T. Huxley's Evolution of the Species, Thomas Paine's Age of Reason. At the end of my literary and mental excursion with Ingersoll, I had become a hearty admirer of agnosticism. I made further progress in this new field. I read other books, including T.H. Huxley's Evolution of the Species, Thomas Paine's Age of Reason, and another book whose author I don't now remember, entitled Bible on Hell. I became a regular reader of the Rationalist Review. Anyway, this is just telling you about how he became an agnostic. Okay? Let me just see if I can read a bit more from here. So he says, I became a regular reader of the Rationalist Review. From the time of my mental acquaintance and communion with Ingersoll, I attended church only occasionally when there was a wedding ceremony, memorial service, or when my wife successfully insisted on my keeping her company. I found it hard to disbelieve in or to doubt the existence of God, but I vehemently disavowed the legends and fictions which the Israelites and their successors in dogma have woven around him. I positively held the view that down the ages, different groups of men have at different times created their own God in their own warped image, and that so long as these dogmatic, erring fanatics continue to project their own self-created God instead of the true God, so long will there be room for rational men with the courage of their conviction to feel impelled to repudiate the man-made God. During my stay in the United Kingdom from 1944 to 1946, I did not cross the portals of a church except for sightseeing to Westminster Abbey and St. Paul's Cathedral. So we're going to jump from here to 1932. Early in April 1932, I was informed by telegram by my cousin Simon Awolowo that the post of college clerk was vacant. It was newly created. There was no such post in the college up to the end of 1931. I went to Ibadan immediately to apply in person. We were 3 applicants in all, and a day was fixed for us to do a test. I won. As college clerk, I combined the work of a shorthand typist with that of a bookkeeper. I was thorough, discreet, and efficient in my work. Of my own volition, I worked in and out of office hours, all depending on the volume of work on hand at a given time. 1932 means at this point he is 23 years old. Teachers and teachers in training, among all of whom I had many friends. In all matters pertaining to my duties, the principal and the college authority trusted me absolutely. A tribute to this effect was paid to me in the testimonial given to me when I left Wesley College as its clerk. I am still proud of it, and it reads, I don't know if you want to read everything there. He left in August 1934, and they said Mr. Obafemi Awolowo has been employed as clerk at this college since April 1932. His work has been chiefly correspondence and copying. He can take down letters and so on and so forth. And talk about what he did in his course of his duties. For the 2.5 years that I spent at Wesley College as its clerk, I took myself extremely seriously. I exercised Spartan control and discipline over myself and went about my business independent and unafraid. I enjoyed the respect of all those with whom I came into contact. In certain respects, however, I must have been a puzzle to the principal and his staff. I did not enter the chapel. Sorry, I did not enter the college chapel once, and I don't remember ever sharing a joke with the principal or with anyone else other than my intimate friends. For some months, I was not on speaking terms with the vice principal, Mr. Hodges. During the absence of the principal on leave, I went on to collect certain drafts for typing. He handed them to me, and I turned away. He then called me back and asked if I knew what the custom in England was when something was handed by someone to another, as he had just done. I had not been to England, and I told him so. He then explained that an Englishman on receiving the papers would have said thank you. So I told him that customs differed, and that among the Yoruba people, you only say thank you when you are the recipient of a gift, and that in any case, I was not an Englishman, and I did not see why I should be expected to know and observe this particular English custom. He was annoyed more by the way I addressed him than by what I said. He fined me a sum of money, which he deducted from my salary at the end of the month. Since then, and until the principal intervened, we both had regular business intercourse, but it consisted only in my going to his office to collect drafts from him or from his desk and turning away without saying as much as good morning or good day. This is all because of that white issue, like the disdain for white folks that they got from studying those things from Albert Macaulay. Omolile Abi. That's what happens when you are young and you are very idealistic. And only once the principal asked to know why I did not attend the chapel services, I replied that the only thing that I enjoyed in a church service was the melody of the songs. It happened I explained that my room was near enough to the chapel for me to be fully entranced with the sweet voices of the college choir. It was a mark of exemplary tolerance on the part of the Reverend E.G. Nightingale that he did not remove me from my post in the college on account of my general disposition and my attitude towards the church. I, on my part, made no attempt to interfere with the religious views and practices of my friends or of the staff and students in the college. But if anyone tried to preach church-going and the teachings of the Bible to me, as was occasionally the case, I very quickly worsted him. It is my candid view then and now that the vast majority of Christians, including the clergy, are too ill-equipped dialectically to combat with success the aggressive detractors and traducers of our great religion. Of course, it was just a phase for him, but the last thing Papa said here is very true. Most Christians cannot defend Christianity. They can't, including ministers, and it's not so cool. I'll read that in again. It is my candid view, then and now, that the vast majority of Christians, including the clergy, are too ill-equipped dialectically to combat with success the aggressive detractors and traducers of our great religion. The person who was agnostic is now telling you our, tells you eventually he resolved. It's good to have those. I always talk about crisis of faith. It's okay to have crisis of faith. I've had one myself. But when you come out, at least you come out better. You're able to defend what you believe, not just. So let's stop here for today. Okay. And intentionally decided to be reading this period because it also helps all of us to read together. So that way, whether you're able to read or you're busy working, at least either you can take this as you reading, or it can also spur you to get the book and other things yourself. But I want us to know Awo a bit more. That's the truth. I want us to know him and to see his path, and then to that path as well. Then we'll do better than him in our generation by God's grace. All right. I'm sure he would want that, to be honest. That's what he would want. I mean, that's why we spent all those time and hours and days poring over books and planning for us to be educated. All right.